All right, thanks everyone. My name is Cheryl. I'm with NACB and the Consultants Training Institute. Before we get started, I want to go over a few items today. First, if you received a lot of emails from us this weekend, I apologize. We had some email issues, and hopefully you guys all got the links to join us. For CPE credits, Michael, if you want to go to the next one. If you have a AVW subscription with us, please respond to all the poll questions that pop up on your screen during today's webcast to receive CP credit. CP certificates will be available on the nacb.com portal within 7 to 10 business days after the webcast. Michael, if you go to the next slide, please. We do have some additional resources. With AVW, try to keep your abreast on all the upcoming issues and all the hot topics in the industry. But we can't cover all the topics, so we wanted to make sure that you had links to all the other publications and additional resources that are available to you, where you can access some of the information. We also have there's the Business Valuation Articles Library with over 9,000 articles in the Income Assist subscription. So if you go through that, if you have any questions on how to access any of that, please feel free to let us know. We'll be happy to help you with that. And then with that, I'm going to turn the time over to Alina, who will get us started, or Mel, excuse me, who will get us started with the webcast today.
Awesome, and thank you, Chinda. Welcome to this this month's program. We've got a great program for you today. Actually, we're going to start off again with Michael Gregory, which we always do. Industry headlines, wealth of information, stuff that you can go deeper on. Then Cheryl Hyder is going to interview Nick Mears about harnessing AI in the evaluation practice. This one is going to be intriguing because I've been exploring AI like crazy. Then Stephen White is going to be looking at rollovers as a business startup and unlocking retirement funds in a business. And then I'm going to be having a conversation with my friend Shannon Weinstein about how fractional CFO services can create lasting client value and relationships. Michael Moeller is going to give us some valuation verdicts, and then we're gonna close off with our judges panel and Janae Castell having a conversation with the judges. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael Gregory. Michael, are you there? Michael is a BV mediator, negotiator, specialist. He's written numerous books, has had experience for many years, helped many of our members. He's also worked with the IRS and in various valuation disputes. A wealth of knowledge and information right there at your fingertips. From Michael is always here to help. Michael, you can take it away, man.
Thank you very much, Mel. It's my pleasure to be here. Got a number of different articles we're going to go over today. I'm going to be looking at the screen next to me because the screen didn't flip to my other screen for some reason, just a little technical glitch. So I'm really paying attention, but I'm looking at this other screen. We're going to talk about on-the-ground coverage of the NACA Super Conference and some of the key points from that. The new CBV on ESG is being published. I'll talk about that. NACA releases 2 new databases in 2024. Very exciting stuff coming up. BVR survey reveals that cost of equity data sources of choice. So 2 different surveys here. One with BVR, another one here is with Kroll. And then AI studies. We just talked about AI, and we're going to have some conversations on that today, which is really cool. Top several McKinsey lists for 2023. So this is a #1 item that was from the McKinsey consulting firm, and I'll give you a link to that. Nematorin posts his first data update for 2024. So in terms of our main objectives for today, apply key concepts from the NACFA Super Conference, note insights on ESG from the Canadian Business Valuation Highlights, note NACFA to release 2 new databases, identify cost of equity from BVR, and then look at what the survey says from Kroll, and then distinguish 2 AI studies from McKinsey, what that might mean for you. And then Nematorin has insights from the first quarter for 2024. So from the Super Conference, I was there. It was a really cool conference, and hope you can make the one that NACFA is going to have this fall too. A beta version of the DLOM calculator directed by Dr. Ashok Abbott, that's available. I have a link to that. A lot of talk about AI with eye-opening examples and cautions and some elements relative to ethics and a number of different things. Growth rates dependent on point of the life cycle. Make at least 1 marketing call per day. That sounds like a lot. I actually had a recommendation from one of my own mentors that I should try and do that 3 times a day. And I'd say that I've been able to do that most of the time, but now I've been in business for quite a while. So I've got a lot of different ways I can send out emails or make a phone call or different elements. And young BD practitioners need flexible work schedules. That was one of the elements from the conference. I was up front as a facilitator with a number of younger individuals, and that came through pretty loud and clear. So let's take a look at the details. The Canadian business valuation folks have insight on environmental, social, and governance. And they've actually come up with a 14-page paper that they are presenting as to how you may want to consider those things when you're valuing a firm. It's an emerging trend. We don't have any standards on this right now. It's an expert's perspective on how you can integrate this within your BV commentary when you're talking about the industry or this firm and what these things might mean for that. And then strategic insights, and they provide some practical advice in that 14-page paper that you may find very helpful. NACFA releases 2 new databases. Now, Parnell Black said this is extremely exciting coming forward, and I'm looking forward to this. They said it's going to be testing with value source software. One of them is on DLOM to be released in the first quarter of 2024. And as most of you know, I was the person who was the champion of the DLOM publication that the IRS has. It's pretty dated today. So I'm looking forward to what is NACFA come up with a new DLOM release. So I'm looking forward to that. Estimating the company's growth rate, that's going to be released in the second quarter of 2024. And I suspect that may be multiple growth rates depending on how far out we're going into the future and what it looks like for that industry and for that company. That's my guess. I'm looking forward to seeing that. Parnell Black says it's going to shake up the profession. And if you want to read his actual commentary, look at the fourth quarter CEO message, and it'll have that in there for you. Okay, so here are the BDR survey results from looking at the cost of equity, the different sources. And you can see what it is over time, but I'm really focusing on 2023. And Kroll, Duff and Phelps, Cost of Capital Navigator still remains the primary one. But BDR in their survey, with whoever these went out to, came back and said about 35% were looking at BDR cost of capital from the BDR survey. The other ones, pretty much DeModern and Pepperdine show up the same. And then the Kroll with the SBDI yearbook, that's dropped quite a bit, but Kroll Cost of Navigator is up quite a bit for 2023. Well, then there's a Kroll conducted its own survey, and I've got data on who they had in the survey. 706 participants, but they said up front, 15% are from Kroll, so you're probably going to see a bias that way. 78% from North America, 38% were considering using ESG factors in valuation, and 51% incorporate country risk adjustments directly into their discount rates. That's the Kroll data. What does it look like? Well, it says Kroll is still up there, but Kroll's in here in several points. It's in there as the recommended ERP, the long-term historical average published by Kroll, and the fourth item down is the supply side ERP. It's published by Kroll. Other historical data or implied ERP sources are in there. The moderate is up a little higher, but about the same number. Others not applicable, 13.5. In this case, BDR's cost of capital was quite a bit lower. But remember now, this is a Kroll survey. And we had the BDR survey. The BDR survey said that was about 35% with their survey participants. What you can say is BDR is new, and it's actually doing pretty well. Kroll continues to be up at the top. The modern information and other sources are still about the same. But these are the major sources, I think, is the real key or point to this. AI studies top several McKinsey lists for 2023. The number one best read report from McKinsey, and they put out a host of reports, is the economic potential of generative artificial intelligence, next productivity frontier. And I'm just went into that report. I'll give you a link to it in our commentary. But these are the different areas in the report. So you're looking at customer operations, marketing and sales, software engineering, research and development, and these four areas incorporated 75% of what's in the report. There's also the state of AI in 2023. This is another McKinsey report. Generative artificial intelligence breakout rate. At least 20% of their EBIT in 2022 is from AI. That's what their study is saying. 20% of the EBIT in 2022 is from AI. And 2/3 will increase AI over the next 3 years. That's what this study says. So it's very important in terms of the impact it's having on productivity and returns on entities. Modern has its first update for 2024. New York Stern School of Management. If you don't know Aswath Damodaran, I subscribe to his blog. I appreciate what he has to write. He's an academic and he shares things from that perspective. He has information on risk-free rates, equity risk premiums, corporate default spreads, corporate tax rates, country risk premiums, and other data. And he has an implied ERP for this year, starting the year at 4.6%. Here are some of the additional resources for the DLOM calculator. This is the link to Dr. Ashok Abbott. For the Canadian Business Valuation Insights, understand the value impacts of private companies through ESB lens. You can take a look at that. Should be ESG lens. Kroll survey report for November of 2023. Here's a replay of a webinar that goes along with that survey report from Kroll. Here's Damodaran's first musings on markets. And here's the economic potential of generative AI, the next productivity frontier from McKinsey, if you want to download that and read their report. Pretty insightful. Additional resources, the state of AI for 2023. This is the second report on generative AI's breakout year. So these are the different sources that I look at each month. DB Wire, DB Update, the Value Examiner, NACFA, Valuation Products and Services, IRS, and I'm expanding. I'm going to include Quick Read, a couple of the international publications, and some other things going forward this year, more so than I have in the past. So you're going to see some more diverse sources going forward in the future. Should be a lot of fun. Looking forward to the rest of this year. And with that, this is my contact information. You can contact me anytime. The call is always free. There's my phone number. That's my email. And with that, I'm going to say thank you very much. It's a pleasure for me to be with you here today. I'm always grateful to be here. And I'm going to pass it back to Elena.
Thank you, Mike. It's always awesome having you, especially with all the information that you bring to us. It makes it easier for us, and we appreciate it. We appreciate that. So for everyone, you have your first polling question, so make sure you respond to that. And our next session is a very interesting one, because when we are planning the different topics for the new year, we were discussing how artificial intelligence has been, creating a lot of noise. And during the December conference, I was in one of the presentation with Mears, and he was talking precisely about this topic. And it was kind of an aha moment when you keep hearing people talking about information, but when you know that you can use that to improve your practice, it is amazing. So we right now have Cheryl Hyder. She's going to be talking with Nick, and they are going to be discussing harnessing AI in your valuation practice. Cheryl.
Sorry about that. So we're going to talk about how Nick uses AI. You all know who I am. So Nick is the guy who, as I put it, when he and I spoke, he swallowed the frog. He started sharing the ways that he is increasing the efficiencies in his own practice using available technologies. A while ago, he started a small business called Solo Rocket, where he has everything available to us. And, he's also a solo practitioner, does what we do. He appreciates and is he's an enthusiast for what's efficient and how to do our practice better and quicker and more right sometimes, I guess all the time. He's also the guy, by the way, that NACFA appointed to chair its AI working group, where it's looking at, where NACFA's looking at how to best incorporate the AI in what we do. So first, what I wanted to share with you guys is, after speaking with Nick for about 40 minutes, he convinced me. I'm not an early adopter by any stretch, and he convinced me to give it a whirl. So I set up an account with ChatGPT, and here's the question I asked it. Beginning of the question, anyway. Question was, how do I create value in a solo practice, or what a friend of mine calls a single shingle? And ChatGPT started a whole dialogue, which began with specialize and differentiate, something that we've all heard about. So AI, if you think about it, is really, it shows how far we've come. Back in, the early days of the internet, Archie here was the very first use of artificial intelligence, and it was only searching for file transfer portals. And then not so long after that, we had that dreaded paperclip. So now where we are is we're at a place where, as Nick put it most enthusiastically, you can ask your AI, whatever it might look like, to make you a cup of coffee, but you don't know if you're going to get what you actually want or you're going to get a mess on your hands. The point being, you need to make sure that you get the inputs right. So it's about choices. And, what Nick and I spoke about was he would much rather be the fella on his mountain bike or other bikes than the fella stuck behind his desk. He made his choice. He's also made a very strong case that it's time that we, embrace the latest that technology really has to offer us. So Nick, do you want to talk about this paradigm shift that we're dealing with?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely an interesting time right now, because AI, as we know it and as we've been hearing about it, it's really not going to be the same at the end of the year, much less at the end of 2025. Some people are electing to use it. Some people don't want to use it. I kind of look at this as, it's kind of like the internet. I was around when Google wasn't around, when we went to libraries and had to use index cards. So I think right now we're at that inflection point where there's a lot of resistance. But to me, I'm not an early adopter on any new tech by any stretch of any means. But, I reached a paradigm shift myself by thinking of, this isn't going away. So I'm invested, personally, at least in tech companies. So I try to watch what they're doing, and they're doubling down and tripling down. And in our industry is going to have to be accepting this AI as a useful tool in the future. And I think there's a good point there on that second bullet. It's not a black box solution, and it's really interesting. Everyone says in our industry, it's you need professional judgment. You have to use professional judgment. I 100% agree. And I'm championing those words that AI is not going to be anything that's going to replace what we do and who we are and the service that we provide. I think it's going to enhance it. I think there are traps. There's a lot of landmines to step on if you're not aware, or if you choose to be lazy in your application of it.
Yep.
But it's not a black box. So you're not going to be able to use it and then get an output and walk away. And it's really interesting. That's the one commentary that I get from most people when talking about AI is they expect perfection when they are expecting an output.
Right.
And it's like, well, go right back to what you were previously saying about you need professional judgment and oversight. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to get you 80% of the way there. You may have some manipulation that you're going to need to take. So I think it's time for everyone to just accept AI is here. It's not going away. And I think if you get on board now, you're going to be able to see the changes as they continue to evolve, and you're going to be on the leading edge rather than a lagger.
Yeah, we'll talk about the training and supervision piece and what we're obligated as professionals to do in a little bit. But right now, Nick, why don't you spend a little time and talk about how we can use AI in your practice?
This is a great slide, and I'll do a little demoing here in just a minute. I wanted to show at least how I think about AI as it pertains to valuation or financial forensics and how I use it in my practice. Because I'm a practitioner, Solo Rocket's a separate entity I set up for setting up efficiencies for solo practitioners in our field. But I own a small little independent shop, Caprock Business Consulting, and I use it two different ways in my practice. When I'm thinking about valuation, how I'm going to use it in my valuation engagements, a couple of different areas, right? There's quantitative and then qualitative. So from a qualitative perspective, if you're drafting a report, I'll show you some insights on how I do that in a Word document. But there's some different tools you can use. You can use ChatGPT, you can use Microsoft's Copilot, and you'll usually find yourself in a unique situation where you have to draft a paragraph. You need some help writing it. Maybe your friend's not always available to pick up the phone and help you write that paragraph. So there's some really good AI out there that's just using large language models and how we usually and naturally talk in normal conversations. And you can just draft a really ugly paragraph saying, these are all the things that I want to say with regard to this current matter. clean it up, make it look professional, give me a professional, concise tone, and rephrase the entire paragraph, and it will do it. And that's the interesting part where I get most commentary back is, well, it did a good job, but it didn't do it perfect. Well, it's never going to do it perfect. Just like you were a valuation analyst in your first year, you weren't writing perfect paragraphs, and I've been doing this, I don't know, I've done 700 valuations, and I still can't draft a perfect paragraph where it's got, preferred stock and restricted stock units and all this other things, so you need some help. And this can be really that good administrative tool, that second set of eyes, that second pair of eyes that's really helping you critique and draft really good paragraphs. You can summarize some of your research. I'll jump in and I'll show you exactly how I do that right now. I'll do a share screen. Let's take a look here.
Yep.
And
the one before that, hang on. Taking it?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll take it real quick. I'll give it right
Okay.
back to you. So this is just ChatGPT. This is just their open website, and I'm going to log in and I'll show you my setup here on my chats, because I know a lot of you are unfamiliar. You may have not even opened up ChatGPT or know what it exactly looks like. But here at the bottom, you can run a chat, and a chat is just you're talking to it. You're asking it a question. Imagine you're going to chat with a friend. How would you chat with your friend? Chat with ChatGPT the same way. When I was starting out, I created a chat and I called it Caprock Business Consulting, which was my firm. And at the very beginning, you can see it's a long, long thread. And I wanted to communicate with ChatGPT and say who I am, what I'm doing, and all the future chats. It keeps a long string of anything I'm talking to it about. And I wanted this long, my research was showing you just want long string chats because it can go back to your history and say, oh, Nick Mears does this. This is why he's asking this question. This is the type of tone he's looking for. So I just said, my name's Nick Mears. I'm the owner of Caprock Business Consulting. These are the services that I do. These are the credentials that I have. And one of the things I also learned that you'll see in a later slide is learning how to prompt, what they call prompt. It's just learning how to talk to it. You're talking to it in your natural language, but I said, you don't need to repeat this, but do you understand who I am and what it is I do? And this is probably one of the most important pieces about any type of AI chat that you're using, is trying to confirm that it does in fact understand without just sitting there repeating. You can see where it was kicking it out, saying, yep, you went to school here. This is exactly what you do. And now you can just start communicating with it and talking with it. You
That's
can run
positively brilliant.
What's that?
That is brilliant. That's why I salute you.
Well, this is my very first run with ChatGPT, I think probably around June of last year. And I've been just toying with it, trying to see like, what can it do? What can it not do? Recently, I was talking to a different board member on NACFA, and we were talking about AI. And I said, look, there are problems with it. This is the problems that you see with AI when relying on it. I wanted it to run a present value formula, and I just gave it a really clear instruction. This is what I'm looking for. And I wanted to see what the present value factors were. Anyone who's on the call today can do a 5-year present value factor, determine what each of those present value factor periods are. I said, oh yeah, I'm also doing mid-year convention. Show me what that formula is. Show me what it looks like. I've already done the calculation to double check. And the calculations were right. But what was interesting is when it gave me the formula, when it did the mid-period convention, it didn't actually subtract half the year, it added half the year. So it gave you the kick out that was right. But if you copied and pasted that formula in and you were going to use that for your report, it'd be wrong. So these are those insights where it can give you a lot of good stuff. It can give you some clarity. You can ask it to run tables. How would you present this in a report? And it will give you illustrative examples. It will give you tables. It will give you what you're asking for mostly. But it's how you talk to it. It's really how you're using it. You can also talk about tone. You can say, rephrase this email. That's a great way that I'm using it. Whenever I'm doing an email, let me pull up an email real quick. So this is ChatGPT. So this is using it for like the valuation side. But there's a whole other side that I'm using this, which is not valuation really at all. It may be how you run your practice, and maybe from an administrative standpoint. So if I'm pulling up an email, I was going to pick on my wife. I had a chat going with my wife a long time ago, and I've got an app called Copilot. Now, Copilot is a Microsoft app anyone who knows me or has sat in any of my Solar Rocket stuff, I don't get paid by third-party vendors. I don't care about any of that. I just want something that's going to be here next year. It's going to be here 2 years from now. And by here, I mean the company. I don't want to use a fly-by-night brand new company. It just came up in 2023 or 2024. I'm using Microsoft. Hate me for it if you want. Don't. It's not going to hurt my feelings. But Microsoft, I'm using a lot of their different apps. And Copilot is their AI app that integrates with all their Microsoft products. One of the things I find as being a sole practitioner, the hardest thing is, trying to collect on invoices, trying to really push your clients to get the data that you need. And the older I get, the more direct and the more concise my tone gets. So I want to soften up some of that sharp edge sometimes, and you can use Copilot to do that. It'll also provide summaries of a text string or your email string. You can say summarize by Copilot, and it will give you a bullet point chronological timing of events of exactly what all this entire email string. And I had one that was extremely long, and it gave really nice, concise bullet points, if you will, on how to do that. And you can create a new email. I'll say I'm going to write Cheryl, and I can use
Nice.
Copilot right here, or I can click in here and say draft with Copilot. And I can say draft. Setting up a.
While he's tapping that out, I just want to throw in a practical application. Nick and I spoke about maybe 2 weeks after I got out of a case, and I had to set email aside while I worked on, this trial. And when I got back to my email and I needed to catch up, from one client, I had over 125 emails that I then needed to summarize. So when Nick and I were talking, I said to him, where were you a week ago? I needed to get the summary in a more concise manner than how I went through it. And his answer was what y'all are seeing right there. Thanks, Nick.
Absolutely. Yep. It can save a lot of time. I'm all about efficiency. Like I do a lot of evaluations a year, but I like to play a lot. I ride motorcycles. We go camping. I'm trying to live the ultimate life, just not spending the time here. And this is a great way to do it. Like you can see either I misspelled her name. I actually probably did in the quick chat, but you have to check for misspellings and things like that. But I hope you're doing well, having a great day. I wanted to check in to see if you have some time slot to chat about our project. I have some ideas and questions I'd love to share with you on feedback, right? This may not be your tone. The cool thing is you can keep it, you can discard it, you can regenerate it. If I was going to discard it and start all over, you can do this tone checker here. And you can say, I want a direct tone to neutral, casual, formal, make a poem on it, short, medium, long. These are the cool things that you can do. I'd love to show you how I use this in OneNote. I use OneNote for my practice management. And one thing I've been toying with here recently is I could, if I've got permission from a client, maybe I've got an hour-long management interview, I can record that conversation and start taking notes of our conversation. And when I realized Copilot was going to work the way it was, I envisioned it to, I went to the tab in OneNote that had an hour-long phone call with me and another person. And I said, based on this, based on the recording for this client, give me a summary of action items of who's doing what, when it needs to happen, whatever. Or I can just say, provide me an entire summary of the conversation. It'll convert that entire conversation into text. It'll read the whole thing and it'll summarize it. And you can just sit there and start working with AI on that chat. You can start pulling things out that you want to ask it. It is pretty powerful and it's really, really fast. We're talking an hour-long chat. It can give me a summary in 10 seconds. So
Nick,
pretty powerful stuff.
When you're talking about Copilot, before we jump back to chat, the OpenAI, when you're talking about Copilot, isn't there a subscription that you need to pick up as part of Microsoft 365 in order to access it?
It is. And two caveats. So it's about $360 for a year to use it. To me, it's pretty cheap because I guess, our software and valuation is pretty expensive. So 360 to me is pretty cheap. I found I love ChatGPT more. But when I'm trying to integrate different apps in here, it really has its place. So how I'm using it for like emails or summarizing conversations, it's, I know it's going to save me more than 2 hours in a year. That breaks even with itself, the way I see it. And it's probably going to save me more like 50, 60 hours, just kind of doing some of my rough estimates and over an entire period or an entire
Mhm.
year. ChatGPT is a little bit better to me because you can upload PDFs. So
Right.
earlier when I showed you, when I pulled up CapRock and I said, here's who I am, here's the firm, here's what I do. Nowadays, they're coming out with new updates quarterly, even sometimes a little bit more frequently, and you can upload PDFs. So I've done a new
Right.
version where I've uploaded the Texas Family Law Code, Texas Rules of Civil Procedure, Federal Rules of Evidence, anything that was publicly available. I'm not putting in private information or books inside this.
Mhm.
I'm putting in publicly available information. And then
Right.
if I've got a really hard case, maybe a goodwill issue, I can ask it questions and it will reference case law that it's reading inside those PDFs. So it's synthesizing thousands of pages of already public domain information, and you can start
Right.
custom tailoring it for your need.
And that's Nick, and that's why I thought it would be important to show folks when you twisted my arm sufficiently that I opened my own chat GPT account. I just thought it would be interesting if I shared with everybody the first slide I'm sorry, the first page that chat GPT greeted me with. Like you said, it's don't put your personal stuff out there. Don't put anything sensitive out there. Ask it any questions, which Nick's been telling us about. And then make sure that we check our information. Look at that. I almost just clicked on that guy. Okay, let's go. So the chat that I had started with, well, I also decided to take a look at Gemini because Nick had me, feverishly learning about this stuff. And what I saw from Gemini, so I asked it, how is it different? It gave me all kinds of technical stuff that my eyes glazed over after about 30 seconds. Now there is a little bit of controversy right now, I was reading about last night with Gemini. So just be careful with what it's going to give you as compared to what you may be looking for. Now, with that, Nick, I think you have your checklist here that you want to talk about. So why don't you take back the reins here?
Yeah. So this is what I wanted to just include for somebody, because you hear these words like prompt or chat, like what are we really talking about? Well, when you're asking, say, I'm just going to pick on ChatGPT because there's a lot of different ones that are out there, Gemini and all that. When you're asking it, whether it's an email or whatever, you want to clearly define whatever your goal is and then tailor your response. You're trying to think about the finish line, not just the beginning step. So create an email to Cheryl. I saw Alan Zip put something in the comments here. So create an email to Alan Zip. And I want you to do this in a professional tone. And there's a book that I love, and I use it all the time in my practice. It's from Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference. And he has really good key points inside there. So I may say, I've got a really tough, and I couldn't find it in enough time. I had a client who was 120 days past due on their bill, and I probably is going to avoid trying to pay it to the extent they can. So I wanted to draft a really good one-page concise letter to say, I want to collect on this client. Here's the facts on this client, and use the key points from Chris Book's Voss Never Split the Difference. And I would use something like this. You can use this 6-prompt checklist to prompt your chat to tell AI what it is you're looking for, to get closer to the end result you're looking for. Get that, instead of Chat GPT or whatever your AI source is, getting 80% of everything correct, using something like this will get you closer to like 100% or 99% correct, where your inputs maybe are a little less. But whatever you're using, you still need to have oversight. You need to agree with whatever it's saying. So if you're deciding to use AI, I think the takeaway today is make sure that you are looking at it and you are agreeing with it, whether you're using it in your evaluation practice or for administrative procedures. Keep a high level overview on what it's giving you.
I am sensational, but I am better now that I'm talking to you.
So this is one of your sample prompts, which we have 4 minutes left. So
Yeah.
maybe we can just gloss over. This is one of Nick's samples that he was just speaking to. As you guys can see in the deck, it's client 118 days past due. Here's the email that resulted. And then we come along to making sure that ChatGPT knows what you want. You want to speak about what you produced here using chat?
Yeah, so this is, I just uploaded some PDFs, and these are PDFs of different case laws that were, I knew that were out there relating to personal goodwill. And I wanted to just create a summary. And I knew the end result was I didn't want a whole book on the summaries. So I said, based on these court cases, provide me summaries of personal goodwill elements, what I called PGWE elements. I said, just give me a very concise, high-level table of the takeaway elements that were found from each of those cases. So you can see this here, Martin v. Ice Cream. The personal goodwill elements was relationships with customers, or you go to Cullen v. Commissioner, personal relationships affecting the company's earnings or their individual reputation, shareholders and employees, their individual skills and reputation. So this was just a very summary way to say, if you've got, like, say, a personal goodwill issue based on the case law that you know, is there any case law out there without having to read maybe hundreds of pages that pulled that out? And then you could say, provide a source on exactly where to find it. You can get a little bit more specific. You can continue with this chat and say, I've got one on reputation. Maybe I want to use Newcomb v. Commissioner. Based on Newcomb, provide me a source on where personal ability and reputation was found, and it may say go to page 670 at this site and you can go find it. So it's to provide a faster shortcut, to be more efficient, so you could do that work in, say, 10 minutes rather than a couple hours.
Right. The point being, you have to put the time in up front, just like when you're training a human to be your assistant, right? You've got to do that with your AI as well. So
Right.
in general, Nick, talking about ethical concerns overall, we know that the AICPA, because everyone is right now is talking about AI, right? And the concerns about how we do what we do. So is there anything you want to tell us about ethical concerns that you're aware of, other than what we have here, which I ripped off from the AICPA? I say loud and proud, it's right there on your slide. This is from the AICPA's AI project task force. Anything you want to add about this, or?
No, I would say, as long as, however you're deciding to use it, if you're rendering an opinion, or if you're talking to somebody and you're using AI as your foundation, it shouldn't be your foundation. First off, your knowledge, your experience, education, training, and skills is your foundation. AI is just a tool to help you use those skills a little bit faster.
Right.
So as long as you have oversight over the AI process, whatever you're using, and you are deciding to use AI, say, in your report, at the end of the day, there is no safe harbor, and you have to agree with whatever it is saying, even if you agree 100%, or if you made some modifications. You have to have oversight on doing it. Do not trust that it's going to work 100% of the time. I always find errors in it. Some of that is based on how I asked it to do what I want to. Some of it is it will lie. It will come up with its own answers at times.
Well, that's kind of goes back to whatever we're putting out as experts, it's over our signature, not the chipset inside your laptop. So you'll recall that I said at the beginning that I put in a prompt, how can I create value in my solo practice? And the initial paragraph was blah, blah, blah. We've seen it 10,000 times or more. So the very end of the script that I received in response, I thought was rather profound, considering our topic today. We're creating value, reassess what we're doing, and refine our approach. That's exactly what we're doing here. So we're rewriting the ending, and very proudly, again, Nick's got a whole bunch of resources within Solo Rocket. Another AI source is creating images. And I just thought this was a really cute puppy that I created. Wanted to include him. And with that, I want to turn this back over to, I believe, Mel.
Oh my God. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Cheryl. This is a fascinating topic that I think that we have just just started to scratch the surface. So,
Right.
so thank you again. I think there's more to come. So,
Yep.
Thanks, Mel.
awesome. We're going to move to our next session, and this is going to be Stephen White. We've got our second polling question up. You want to make sure you answer all of those to make sure that you have the right CPE. I'm going to introduce Stephen White. He's going to introduce his guests. He's going to be talking to them about a rollover as a business startup and unlocking a retirement from business. Stephen, my friend, it's so good to see you. And now that we've got your camera running,
I know.
I'll let you take it away and introduce everyone and get this thing rolling.
Absolutely. That was a fantastic topic that we just went over. But I can assure you, we also have some great content that we're going to go over today. I have the pleasure of interviewing Derrick Skogsberg, who is the founder and CEO of Tenet Financial Group, and his partner with us today, Sam Phelps. He is the director of development at the Tenet Financial Group. So, gentlemen, if you are both there, if you could turn on your cameras, that would be great. Derrick and Sam?
I'm here.
All right, there we are. How are you this afternoon?
Really good. Thank you for having us.
No, my pleasure. My pleasure. Listen, we don't really have slides that we wanted to present over. I know your bios are there. We could spend time going over that, but I'd rather just dive right in and ask you some pertinent questions pertaining to this rollover as business startups. Why don't we start there? Tell us a little bit about rollover as business startups and how that came about.
Yeah, really, the genesis of all of this is the Employee Retirement Income Securities Act of '74. There's not. I would like to think that and say that this is new and inventive and creative on my part, but the truth is, this was statutory law as of 1974, and that's really where the baton was passed between. The responsibility for retirement being, that of the employer to that of the employee. And so that's where you started to see 401k plans come into existence and defined benefit plans, pension plans begin to work their way out of the retirement plan hemisphere. So that's really where the baton was passed. And as time has gone on, the idea of using some number of your retirement plan dollars was a relatively novel idea, 20, even 25 years ago. But today it's gotten to be almost part and parcel to every deal that we see come through, because whether somebody is buying a relatively inexpensive business and they can fund it entirely through retirement plans, or they're buying a larger transaction where the lender requires non-borrowed equity injection to fund the loan. We see it, really in both cases. And so for us, it's the genesis of it, stems back to the, 1974 really, but today it's more, I guess, common amongst the business brokerage community, the franchise community. We see it with loan brokers all the time, commercial loan brokers. And so a variety of people use this transaction, but ultimately it's to start new businesses. It's to get people, into business in a way that allows them to leverage, the equity that they have and not maybe take on as much or any debt, and limit their debt service on a monthly basis in that new business.
I can see that being an attractive feature for startup companies, because obviously you want to utilize something that is going to help you retain good quality talent. Let me ask you a question. As we talked about the funds that are going to be used for this, are there any restrictions on those particular funds through this particular platform?
No, not really. I mean, it gets to be, it's just part and parcel to any standard business. Anything that is required to operate a business from an expense standpoint, including payroll, is allowed. And so it's just no different than borrowing the money to start a new business. It's you using your own money to start this new business. So there aren't any restrictions as it relates to what operational expenses, can be used.
Now, anything new, well, it's not really new. You emphasize that
Yeah.
because it all goes back to 1974. But if we look at just from today's perspective of utilizing this particular platform, what would you say would be some of the misconceptions of this type of a platform or a vehicle, I should say?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I've been doing this type of work for, approaching 25 years now. And if I was to rewind the clock a quarter of a century, I think the biggest question back then was, is it legal? Well, if you
It's a great
reference
question
it,
to start off with. Yeah.
yeah, is it legal? Well, people saw in, was it, gosh, '06, '05, right in there, when people started to see, unfortunate outcomes like Enron or WorldCom. Those situations were simply, transactions similar to this. Those were people that were every 2 weeks at payroll, deferring their money to the company sponsored plan and buying company stock within that plan.
Mhm.
Now, it highlights, a potential pitfall of the program, because if people do use retirement plan money and the business goes out of business, the plan is left with what? With a bunch of worthless stock. And that's
Right.
exactly what happened with Enron and WorldCom and those bigger ones that made the news. But the same potential peril exists here. And so as we're working with people, it's oftentimes a point of discussion for them to consider, the risks involved. Yeah, it's
Mhm.
great that you could start a new business and do so, with very limited amount of debt or none at all. But you've kind of gotten rid of that diversification within your retirement plan potentially if you use the majority of those dollars to buy your own company stock. And so that becomes part of our dialogue as we're consulting with people. It's a consideration, something for them to know and understand going into it.
And discussing Enron, and for those that remember Enron and Qualcomm when that fiasco took place, you have to start thinking, okay, let's look at some of the types of successes that have happened, and how would this apply? Have you seen it already applied to some companies that you can kind of just give the audience an idea of how successful this platform could be?
Well, yeah, I mean, we certainly got a bunch of those, but I mean, I'll just name off some name brands. If anybody's ever heard of a company called, I don't know, Napa Auto Parts or Ace Hardware Stores or, The Joint Chiropractic, I saw one of those go through the other day. Pick a major, brand, and we see those deals all the time come through here. And so those are relatively successful companies, I would say. On an individual basis, those individual units, they are largely off on a better foot if they're using their own money. And if you just think about it from a cash flow standpoint, in any startup new business, one of the biggest concerns and one of the biggest reasons somebody goes out of business is that they're undercapitalized. And so if they know that they go into the business overcapitalized, and if they can do it in a way that doesn't require them to make, monthly payments in 30 days or limit the amount of payments for debt service on a monthly basis, the likelihood for success goes up. And that's what we're trying to do, is swing the pendulum in the favor of the client, of the new small business owner, so that they can, get off on a good footing and really kind of get this business started and cash flowing sooner rather than later.
I think you missed one of the success stories, Derrick. How did you start Tenant Financial Group?
Yeah, well, we live what we preach, and it's a great comment that Sam brings up. And I'm the world's worst self-promoter, I can tell you that. But I've done this twice myself, and I started my first TPA firm doing this. I sold that company. So I've gotten in and out of, businesses using this transaction. And today, it is the plan that we utilize here every 2 weeks at payroll, because I started this company using the same transaction. So I'm not only, it's kind of that, hair club for men thing in a sense, and that I'm not just the owner, I'm a customer too.
That's a great one. Great. So Sam, since you brought up a really good point there as far as a great example of utilizing your own company, let's talk tie this into what we do here on a regular basis on the valuation side. So how would you explain how we would connect the dots between the two?
Sure. Without diving too deep into tax law and ERISA and all the things that we could take up the rest of the afternoon and probably still not understand, it's basically with the transaction and the exchange of stocks where the plan is able to buy shares into the corporation. It really is about adequate consideration. That is the word that keeps showing up over and over for how to define that. And where it ties into the valuation world is there are really 3 different times where you need to define that share value and have that independent report where somebody is following best practices and valuation for the plan. Because remember, we have an active 401k plan that is investing in a privately held company, and we must define those shares of stocks for those filings. So basically, we do it at the onset, at the capitalization, to define the initial share values for which the corporation is buying shares, or excuse me, the 401k is buying shares of the corporation, and that transaction allows for the money to move from the 401k plan into the corporation. Also, every year, as part of the annual filings, the 5500 filing, we have to define a share value at year end for that company. But as we all know, there are times, and one of the benefits of the plan is that you can continue to invest into the corporation. If you have additional equity needs or different cash needs, you can continue to fund your business through the corporation. And so in the interim period, we do provide valuations. It's the same standards that you would see with NACVA or folks that are following best practices, but it needs to be a defined, third party fiduciary that is providing, best practices with adequate consideration.
Okay. Now, as a consultant or advisor, how do you ensure that the clients will fully understand the risk? And I think risk is always, when we talk about the ERISA Act, you're obviously looking at the responsibilities that are there. Can one of you, or Sam or Derrick, whichever, could explain a little more about understanding the risk that are involved with this platform?
Yeah, I mean, we bring it up when we're consulting with clients all the time. I mean, remember, we're an organization that offers really a suite of small business funding solutions, one of which is the 401k transaction. And so we're walking people through each of those transactions, detailing the pros and cons to each.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really done well. That becomes a very empowering point for clients, where that they can make a good decision based on facts. And so we lay it out and go through each of the transactions, so clients can just ultimately make a good decision. As it relates to the plan itself, I detailed probably the most prominent one earlier. But this is a 401k plan, like any other 401k plan. So there are ongoing, responsibilities. Every client that does this, these are what are called self-trusteed, balance forward accounting type of plans. And so the client becomes the trustee. Okay. And what does that mean? Most clients that have come through here, I would venture to say virtually all that come through here have never been the trustee of a retirement plan. Well, as a trustee, you have the responsibility of maintaining accurate plan records. Now, that's where, the TPA side of our company comes in. All of our plan administrators are QKAs, qualified 401k plan administrators, through ASPA. And so we've got a deep bench, I would say, of administrators that can work with clients, because as time goes on and as their business changes, the way that they utilize their plan becomes much less about how they fund the company initially, and much more about how they use the plan for its intended purpose, which is to save for retirement. And so there's a lot that goes into that, because if it's an owner only plan, of course, a lot of the testing requirements that we do aren't so much of a hindrance in terms of their ability to save for themselves. But when non-owner employees enter into the plan, that's where it becomes much more of an issue as it relates to the owner saving for their own retirement. And so all the testing and reporting work that we do on the Form 5500 could hinder a client from maxing out their plan deferrals. And so we'll work with clients initially, trying to understand the benefits and risks of whether or not to employ this transaction through our consultation. But then, assuming they do use this transaction to some degree, either for all of their funding or some portion of it, then it becomes much more of an administrative task for our admin team ongoing. And that, truthfully, guys, that's where clients need us. I mean, I don't want to take away from the uniqueness.
I lost your sound there.
I don't know if you heard.
Hello, Sam, are you there?
Yep, I'm still here.
Okay, we lost Derrick. So while we're getting Derrick back, Sam, can you just elaborate on what ASPA is?
What is the acronym for that? It's the Derrick, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we got you again. Okay, great.
Sorry, guys.
That's okay.
ASPA is the American Society of Pension Planners and Actuaries.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that the listeners understood what that was. Let me ask you something. No, you bring up a really interesting point about the client being the trustee and the types of services that you actually provide over to them. And one of the things that we constantly do here at our firm is that we customize all of our valuation reports because no two companies are alike. With that being the case, how do you articulate this over to your clients or customize the work that you do for your clients?
Yeah, well, it comes in, probably the biggest issue is personal tolerance for risk. When somebody's starting a business, how much risk do they want to take on, and in what form would they like to bear that risk? Because if you're going to go start a business and for instance, get an SBA loan, one of the things you're going to be required to do is pledge collateral. Okay. The lender's going to look for collateral and they're going to take everything that's available. Well, that might be the roof over your head, and that might be a bridge too far for some clients. For other clients, it might be that their retirement plans are sacred, for instance, and they might say, yeah, after going through all of that, I don't want to do that transaction. I'm much more comfortable pledging my house. And either of those outcomes are perfectly fine, but they're all individual personal tolerance for risk types of discussions. And so we just want to be, straightforward with clients and let them choose which transaction or blended transactions that they might feel most comfortable with. It would not only get them into business, but, for instance, with franchises, many of those are sold on a development schedule. So you might buy 3 or 5 or 7 of those things, and the franchisor will require that you continue to develop your territory at certain time intervals. So every 18 months or 24 months, you might have to open another location. And if that's true, then you want to take that into consideration up front. How do I capitalize a business to allow for multi-unit development versus somebody that's just going to open one, Napa Auto Parts location and live, within that one business. So it just kind of depends on the type of individual, depends on the type of business that they're starting. And we just consult based on, the facts and circumstances that are relative to them.
Okay. I see Mel is here, but Mel, if I can just ask one quick question, a lightning question. If you had an opportunity to just kind of give us an idea, the audience an idea of the types of companies or industries that this would be a perfect fit for or a great fit for, what would they be?
It's generally agnostic as to what you can use. The only defining feature is it needs to be an operating company, can't be passive income. So it does have that hindrance, but for the most part, most are eligible to be used in the ROBS transaction. The one thing that we always tell our clients is this is really just meant to be a operating and ongoing company. It's not a funding vehicle. This is meant to be a permanent process, a permanent plan, and permanent way to operate the business, and that goes hand in hand with the operating company.
All right, gentlemen, Derrick, Sam, thank you both very much. As the audience can see here, and Mel, I'm pretty sure you're going to go that. They're going to go into more of an in-depth process of this platform. You can see where you can register online here on the deck, and it will start at 3 to 4 o'clock today.
Yeah. So they'll be doing a full hour presentation to go deeper on some of this and make sure that all your questions are answered. It's a really interesting dynamic, especially when you're talking about liquidity and succession planning and all that stuff. So thank you guys for being here, and we're going to move on to our next session. Awesome. So our next session is with a friend of mine, Shannon Weinstein. She is a CPA. She is the host of an amazing podcast called Keep What You Earn. She's also a fractional CFO and consultant. And so we brought her on to have a conversation around how fractional CFO services have the opportunity for us to potentially create a relationship with our clients, additional income streams, and maybe, just maybe, getting out of the time for money type of paradigm. So I'll let you take it away, Shannon. You can share your screen and we can move from there if you want.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mel. You can hear me, right?
Yep.
Awesome. All right, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen real quick and you should be able to see it. But thank you for that introduction, Mel. Again, my name is Shannon Weinstein. I am a CPA, and I have discovered a true love for making lasting impact for clients. It's just so important. And listening to the presentations this morning, there's a lot of talk about AI, innovation, new ideas. And it doesn't just come in the form of technology. It also comes in the form of how we're shifting our mindset away from the time for money model and away from the transactional, even though we literally help with transactions, to a more transformational model where we can actually create lasting value and a bigger impact for clients. And it's going to become not just an exception, but an expectation of our profession very soon, especially with things like AI. And AI is going to enable us to do that a lot easier, a lot faster, and it's going to elevate the expectation of our profession into providing more insights over information and actually being able to interpret what we're seeing and translate it for our clients. Because AI isn't going to make our clients better clients, but it can make us better practitioners. So with that, I want to just introduce what CFO services are really about, why it could make sense for you, how you can actually make it your own, and why it's going to be a massive value add for you in your practice. Not only is it simply a way to create a recurring revenue stream, which is one of the most obvious reasons that we would explore something like this, but you're creating true customer lifetime value. I was able to create a practice surrounding around CFO services as the core pillar. And I was able to cut my client roster by 80% in volume while doubling revenue. And that was because we focused more on doing more for less people, having a bigger impact for clients who really needed to see that full success story come to fruition, to help them from the transactional all the way through the high value driven questions that they need answering. Questions like, should I hire somebody? How much can I afford to pay this person? What type of compensation structure would actually align with my cash flow goals? And how can I achieve my actual goals for my business, whether that's to sell or to scale it to the point of building a high value business? How can you actually make that happen for them and show them the tools on how to get there? And it's not only just about the recurring revenue stream, high revenue, but better customer relationships, bigger impact, and the ability to actually be a trusted advisor year round with your clients, not just, as I put it, the April 15th one night stand or the single one-time transaction that they're going to have in their entire lifetime of their business. How can you become a present force and a trusted advisor throughout the whole year and throughout the lifetime of their business, so they see you as a trusted partner in that with them, as opposed to singularly someone who's going to help them with one particular area? And the biggest thing that we get compared to as far as CFOs go is, how does this actually differ from what's commonly called CAS, which is client I mean, it keeps changing actually. Client advisory services, client accounting services, define it as you will, but CAS is pretty much your stereotypical bookkeeping and accounting work. There's a bit of advisory in there, but what CAS is really designed to do is what I call it's kind of not to say the bare minimum, but it's the minimum viable services to be successful, to get by. So it's the stuff that has to get done. It's the maintenance. That's what I'm trying to say. Sorry, the maintenance of it is really doing the accounting, doing the bookkeeping, making sure you're staying out of trouble, making sure all your filings are getting done and they're getting done right. That is just the beginning of the story, though. Simply compiling the data, simply presenting the report, presenting the data is the beginning of the story, because there's a deeper narrative going on. And there's a reason why that client is approaching you. And there's a reason why that client needs this help. You may discover through your analysis, through your valuations, through your engagements, that you're seeing other things that are holding them back from, say, a business sale or creating a truly highly valuable entity. You can see the factors that are going to contribute the most to that value. And to take it a step further, you could actually advise them on the things that they could be doing to increase their value in the marketplace, to increase their ability to continue with longevity, and to be able to attract the types of clients that they want to and build the business they want to. Maybe they determine that their goal might be different, to sell versus scale. What if they end up not selling their business, and then you can come in and help them build a more sellable business, a more scalable business alongside of them, using what you know already. And that's the biggest thing, is we all have this in us already. We just have to choose how we want to apply it. And that's one thing I learned a lot as a CPA. They don't teach you how to do this in school, at least they didn't when I was an undergrad, on how to truly make an impact through answering questions of business owners. We learn debits, credits, and all that fun stuff, but you can apply it in a different way in this day and age, especially with the technology and the tools that we have in front of us. And I want you to ask these questions of yourself when it comes to how your clients perceive you. You know, are you seen as the transactional service provider or the transformational one? Do they simply cooperate with you, or do they collaborate with you? Are you focusing on the past versus the future? And this is the most important thing for me, actually, is, are you perceived as an expense to their company or an investment? And all of that sets the tone for how you work with your clients. And ultimately, when you see these presented in front of you, what do you value more? What do your clients value more? What do you think could move the needle for them? And sometimes it's just a matter of shifting how we're presenting what we do, and how we're phrasing what we do, and how we're actually able to articulate the offer. And in this case, you know, the core elements of a fractional CFO service, which is commonly misunderstood and commonly defined in multiple different ways. I mean, you ask anyone in our industry, what does a fractional CFO do? You'll probably get a different answer. And this is sort of my fundamental definition of the minimum of what we should be doing. And of course, it will be custom to every practice. But we're just starting the story at the bookkeeping and accounting. Some CFOs offer bookkeeping and accounting, some don't. And it should absolutely focus on these fundamental core deliverables. We should be doing metrics reporting and goals reporting, forecasting, especially cash flow forecasts, and budgets and projections. We need to be looking in the dashboard, looking forward, as opposed to looking backward and telling them about what already happened. The most high value service, the most high value activity is going to be in helping them avoid the potholes on the road on the way up, not telling them the speed bumps they've already passed, because that is not going to serve them as much in that journey. Also, here's a big lesson that took me a very long time to grasp, which is less is more. Throwing more data and throwing more numbers and throwing more jargon at them, at our clients, is not more value. More deliverables doesn't equal more value. And in fact, it can reduce value exponentially, because you'll end up in a situation where your clients are so confused by how much you've given them, and you've given them so much work to do, that they don't actually feel alleviated by your presence. They feel an additional sense of pressure. to keep up with you. And what we have to do is maintain focus. We have to maintain focus on what will really move the needle for our client right now. I just spoke with someone, another fractional CFO, who literally gives their client one action every single month or every other week. One action that they're asking them to do, because that maintains focus and accountability to say, did you do the one thing I asked you to do? But if you give them 13 things to do, maybe they'll do one or two. But you have to be super focused and super clear and focus on the most impact-driven items. And lastly, specific communication gateways. Can't emphasize that enough. That if you're allowing clients to text you on the weekends and catch you at any moment, then don't be surprised when you come to resent the availability that you've given them and that they're using all of these different gateways to get in touch with you. I say keep it focused on one channel. In this case, we use Slack, and we say hop in the Slack channel if you have a question, and we'll get to it, you know, basically almost like a ticket system. We don't give out personal phone numbers. We don't give out ways for people to get in touch with us outside of Slack or perhaps email, depending on how tech savvy your clients are. But we say there's one channel to get in touch with us, and that's where we process everything. That's also where all of the team is receiving that information. So there's no spot conversations happening on point systems. That's going to be crucial too to their success. So, and again, the hardest part of that is actually doing it, setting it up and then actually following through on it, because we're all tempted to, in the name of client service, cross those boundaries a little bit more. So finally, leading into this is I love to articulate what your clients actually get when you expand into year-round services, especially on the advisory front. And this is actually how you sell it. This is actually how you articulate what you do. You don't tell your clients in a sales call about all of the fancy dashboards and spreadsheets you're going to give them. You're not going to tell them, hey, I have this amazing AI tool and I have this amazing dashboard and it's so cool. Like I can get your profit and loss 10 times faster to you. They don't care. They don't care. They may not even know how to read a profit and loss statement, some of them. And what you're really doing is everything you're seeing here. You're helping them become better leaders of people and teams by actually embracing their numbers and the data that supports the feedback on how well they're doing in their business and giving them tons of clarity on what's working and what isn't, and what decisions they need to be making as leaders of people and teams. They're accountable to the actions you're giving them and getting specific guidance. They're equipped to make sound financial decisions, and they're overall better prepared for the headwinds. And they tend to not sweat the small stuff as much. They tend to not get as stressed out over little things because they know that it's part of the bigger mission, or they know how this season is going to impact the bigger goal because you're keeping them in that zoomed out perspective. And that's really where a lot of the value is driven. And if I go back to testimonials we've received from clients, it speaks to all of this. It doesn't speak to how fancy and beautiful the profit and loss and dashboards were. It speaks to how they feel working with us as opposed to what they receive. So I wanted to wrap up there, Mel, and just post this up in case anyone wants to get in touch with me and connect and nerd out on accounting things. I love chatting with fellow professionals on how we can serve our clients better and just some unique perspectives on what we're seeing in the industry right now.
Thank you, Shannon. One question did come in. I'm just going to throw it out at you. Richard asked, what do you see as the maximum number of clients receiving your CFO services at one time?
Oh, yeah, that will depend on scope. That will depend on your team, right? I find personally for me, and this is just my happy place, is I don't want more than 12 clients in that service. Unless I'm hiring someone else full-time to take on half of them and dividing it up. We've just realized that 10 to 12 is kind of our sweet spot of where we can serve them with that sense of white glove treatment and feel like we're really confident without burning ourselves out and working over hours. Because part of the reason my why was actually to reduce the number of hours we're spending working in the business. So that's where we found our sweet spot, but it's going to be different for everybody.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Shannon, for being here. This is her contact information, and we will move on to the next segment. We've got another polling question up for y'all too.
That's right. Thank you, Mel. It was an interesting conversation. So right now we have Michael Mulder. He's going to be talking about federal and state case law summaries during this month. So I'm gonna leave Michael
Okay.
mentioning all these cases. Hi, Michael.
Hello, you can hear me.
Yes,
Always good to
perfect.
check. All right. So any of you who've been participating around Valuation World for a while, you already know me. You don't need to know anymore. This month, it is time to address the elephant in the room. This is we're going to be talking about a case that has been in litigation now. I think originally filed in 2022. There was several interim orders that came out, and the ones we're talking about, there's two cases we're going to cover because they're sort of interrelated. One is a case, so the case is People versus Trump, and the defendants are Donald Trump, Eric, Don Jr., the Trump organizations, Alan Weisselberg, an accounting manager they had whose name I can't think of. There's a number of people involved in the organization that were responsible for issuing financial statements. Excuse me. So the two cases we're going to talk about are, the first one came out in September. It was a ruling on summary judgment. The second one is more recent, from December, a ruling on motions for directed verdict. And ultimately, in both of these cases, the big things are expert witness ethics and credibility, expert witness ethics and credibility, and expert witness ethics and credibility. These cases are all about how expert witnesses were used, and a number of experts who went way beyond what is normally acceptable. So again, so the background of the case itself, this investigation began following Michael Cohen's testimony in the U.S. House of Representatives. There was an investigation being done, and he had testified that the financial statements, the statements of financial condition for Donald Trump, were manipulated and adjusted to suit the purpose of the specific report. So the Office of the Attorney General issued a subpoena to the Trump organization, and then the Trump organization opposed it. And then in 2020, it was actually 2020, wow, I didn't realize it was that long ago. The OAG actually started the litigation to enforce the subpoenas, and ultimately they filed the complaint. That's right, see, it was 2022. Before the tolling agreement lapsed, the Office of the Attorney General filed a civil complaint alleging persistent fraud and false financial statements that were submitted, which is a violation of New York state law. It is likely a violation of the law in every state, but they happen to be in New York, and so that's what they were dealing with. So it was assigned to Judge Angoran in November of 2022. Judge Angoran appointed a retired judge to oversee the Trump financial statements and any significant asset transfers from that point forward. Hold on a second, sorry about that. Judge Jones actually issued a report in last January, and basically what she said was that during her tenure, every time she pointed out an error or irregularity, those things were fixed. But despite that, the underlying organization was not making fundamental changes in how it was preparing financial statements, and that they would continue to be problematic going forward without ongoing supervision. So getting back to the cases that we're dealing with, the parties filed cross motions for summary judgment. The short and dirty version answer to what a motion for summary judgment is that the assertion in the motion for summary judgment is that there are no material facts in dispute, and therefore the only issue is a question as a matter of law about whether or not judgment should go to one side or the other. In September of 2023, Judge Ngoran issued his order denying the defendant's motion for summary judgment, and in fact found that the motion was filed in bad faith and sanctioned 5 lawyers $7,500 a pop for having filed it in the first place. He granted the Attorney General's motion, making a ruling finding that the financial statements at issue had persistent violations or constituted persistent violations of state law, and ordered a forfeiture of the certificates for the Trump entities involved in the litigation and the appointment of a receiver to liquidate those entities. Now, that part of the order, the liquidation component, is currently under appeal. And then as part of that, the judge set a trial date for determining what the damages would be after finding facts. That trial took place from October through mid-December. You've probably heard, I guess it was about 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, the judge issued his order on the disgorgement issue, and the total is something like $350 million or so. And whether or not that stays or gets appealed is still up in the air. During trial, the defendants moved for directed verdict 5 different times. The directed verdict basically says, okay, we accept all the evidence that the plaintiff has offered, and even looking at all of that, it is insufficient to establish their burden of proof. I already talked about what summary judgment is. Basically just told you what directed verdict motion is. So in these 2 cases, in these 2 opinions, there were 2 expert witnesses involved. I shouldn't say 2 involved. The defendants relied on 2 expert witnesses. The first one was the tenured professor at NYU. Excuse me. His name's Eli Bartov. He is actually originally from Israel. He obtained his equivalent of a CPA license in Israel. As far as I can tell from looking at his bio that's on the Stern website, he has no credentials in valuation or fraud investigation. The defendant's second expert for purposes of the motion for summary judgment was a guy named Jason Flemings, who is a senior managing director at Ancora, which is an accounting firm. I don't know whether the firm is only in DC, but Mr. Flemings is located in DC. And as you can see, he is a CPA and a CFE and a CFF. But neither of them has any experience. And basically this whole case involves valuation. It involves valuation of real estate, and it involves valuation of the entities that own the real estate. And neither of these guys had any experience or expertise in that subject. So going through the court's findings, basically the court determined that the fundamental flaw it found in defendant's motions for a directed verdict is that it assumed acceptance of what the defendant's experts were saying. And essentially Judge Ngoran found these 2 experts completely lacking in credibility. And this quote is from the December opinion on motions for a directed verdict. And so we're going to talk a bit about the court's findings from the motions for summary judgment, but ultimately, what clearly seemed to anger Judge Ngoran was that these guys were going to great lengths to say whatever it is that their client needed to be said, regardless of whether it was accurate or not. And they were repeatedly shown to be inaccurate in what they were saying or absurd in what they were saying. And as a result, completely lost any sense, any kind of credibility with the court. So the undisputed facts from the motion for summary judgment, from the ruling on summary judgment, fell into four categories. One is that the defendants were inflating assets using what they called a brand premium. And then they also reported values that were inconsistent with appraisals that they had gotten. That there were specific debts that they did not accrue any cost for. And that at least in one instance, the statements of financial condition, that the personal financial statements that were supporting personal guarantees on hundreds of millions of dollars in debt included as cash, cash being held by a separate entity in which Mr. Trump had a minority interest. So we're going to go through each of these real quickly. So in this, dealing with the brand reputation issue, the statements of financial condition contained a disclosure that said that the value of the Trump name has substantial, or that the Trump name has substantial value that has not been reflected in the preparation of the financial statement. However, when you start looking at the details underlying the reported values in those financial statements, the defendants were actually tacking on anywhere from 15 to 30% of the individual property values because they were Trump brand. This is particularly in golf courses. They were Trump brand properties. And so the plaintiffs challenged that, or the plaintiff challenged that. And Dr. Bartoff, in his affidavits that supported the motion for summary judgment, was trying to distinguish between tacking on an overall brand value and brand value that is attached to specific individual assets. And so the court assessed that, saying that his being Dr. Bartoff, ensconced in numerous lines of academic jargon, seems to be that defendants said that they were eschewing the former and opting only for the latter. That, however, was inaccurate because the statements of financial condition clearly said that there was no value attached to brand value, no increase of that attached to brand value. And I'm sorry if I'm rushing through this, but there's limited time and there's a lot of stuff. It's that these are great opinions. If you can't get them and you want to read them, shoot me an email and I'm happy to send them to you. But moving on. So the next thing that the judge addressed was the fact that the reported values in the statements of financial condition did not match the appraised values that they had from independent appraisals. So in two particular instances, there were golf courses that were owned by the Trump organization, or that were part of the Trump organization, and they were pursuing or considering a conservation easement, which would have allocated a portion of the real estate, the land, to not be developed. And as a result, in giving that easement to the local government, they would be entitled to a tax deduction for that contribution. So that appraisal for the two properties, one was Briarcliff and one was a Los Angeles golf course. The Briarcliff one was appraised at $16.5 million in April of 2014. And by the end of the December 31, 2014 statement of financial condition, said it was worth $73 million and change. Same thing with the Los Angeles property. Excuse me. It was appraised by an independent appraiser on December 26, 2014 at $16 million. And the 2015 statement of financial condition valued that property at $56 million. So in supporting this differential, Dr. Bartoff claimed that the company had used a fixed asset approach to valuation, which was an acceptable methodology under GAAP. Except their fixed asset approach obviously doesn't even come close to, the opinion doesn't show you how the calculation was done. I don't even know whether that was part of the public record. But suffice to say, the court did not accept the fact that the court basically said, you can't say that this is an acceptable methodology, even though it flies in the face of reality. The next category of alleged misrepresentations was a failure to accrue debt. One of the things, and I don't remember which golf course it was, but in a couple of the golf courses, in purchasing the golf course, the Trump organization assumed liability for non-interest bearing refundable membership deposits. And so basically you make a deposit to join the club, and every year you pay your dues and you pay whatever your current expenses are for it. And the golf course gets to hang on to that money interest-free. That was not set aside in segregated accounts. There was no separate bank account. Basically, they were using the money, millions of dollars not in refundable deposits, and there was no value attached to the liability to repay that. The defendant's argument was that there was no liability because, to the extent they had to repay him, it would have been funded by a new member joining the club, and because there are waiting lists to join the club, there was, in reality, there was no liability. And so the court addressed this issue and found that while the failure to accrue the liability was false, the disclosure was made not misleading. The disclosure made that error not misleading. And then the best one for me, at least, was that the Trump one of the Trump organizations had a 30% investment, limited partnership interest in, I apologize, it's not just, there were two office buildings, one in San Francisco and one in Manhattan. The 70% owner was a separate entity, completely unrelated. And the limited partnership agreement specifically says that the limited partners have no ability to use or withdraw any partnership funds. Decisions on distributions or the use of funds is determined by the general partner. And again, that's not the Trump organization. So in the statements of financial condition, what they did was they took the cash position of this limited partnership and put 30% of that in their cash/liquid assets category. And depending on the year, that amounted to $14 to $93 million. Mr. Flemings was confronted with this during cross-examination. So that first paragraph has to do with valuation and the dispute about whether the appraisal should have been used or some other methodology was used. You can read that, but in responding to the issue of the cash from the limited partnership, Mr. Flemings failed to acknowledge that that was a GAAP violation. All he was willing to say is that that was some kind of red flag. there's that. So really the takeaway from this case, and I should say two cases, is that investment advisors are big fans of the phrase bulls make money, bears make money, but pigs get slaughtered. And I think the same thing really applies to expert witnesses, probably broadly, but in particular in the financial field, financial forensics and valuation. To express opinions where you have no expertise is a huge problem. To express opinions that are wholly inconsistent with professional standards or the evidence that's been presented is going to be a huge problem. And these kinds of rulings are the things that lead to bad reputations. And one of the things, and to give you an idea of bad reputation, so Judge Ngoran, in issuing the ruling on the directed verdicts, or the ruling on the motions for a directed verdict, specifically pointed out that Dr. Bartoff apparently has done this in the past, suggesting he's likely to do it in the future. And same thing apparently came up in a case where he was the expert in 2019, and that court found that, or that court rejected Dr. Bartoff's testimony as unpersuasive. And in particular, it was flatly contradicted by the weight of the evidence, which is the same thing that happened in this case. And with that, I can call it a day. Like I said, if you want a copy of the opinion, feel free to reach out. More than happy to send you a copy.
Thank you, Michael. Now you already have your polling question number 5. It's in front of you, so make sure you respond to that. And now we have one of our sessions that people really enjoy. We have with us today Janae. She's going to be leading the questions to our judges, our panel, and they are going to be talking about AI too. Those AI have a place in the courtroom for financial expert witnesses. Janae.
Great. Sorry, almost. Thanks, Alina. Okay, thank you for being with us, Judge Driscoll. Today we have Judge Driscoll, which is going to be amazing. And we get to hear him kind of give us a little bit more just on his own, what his background and experience has been, to answer all of our questions. You know, I think that we could probably spend a lot more than just the time that we have today talking about some of these nascent issues with artificial intelligence, but we'll kind of start out and hit some of those today, and maybe we'll pick up some other questions later on. So Judge Driscoll, I first wanted to ask you if you think an opinion of value or a calculation of value, maybe from an online calculator, could survive a motion to exclude. Does it count as expert witness subject matter? And what are the factors that would weigh most heavily to either exclude or?
Well, let's take a step back, right? When you're giving me a valuation of anything in my courtroom, you're probably not adding those numbers in your head. You're probably relying on some calculator and putting on your green eye shade and then, you know, plugging numbers. So we start that the quantification that you give me is based on something other than you. It's based on you putting numbers either into a spreadsheet or into a calculator or your iPhone right on the witness stand. So we start with there is almost always some kind of tool other than you that is being used for valuation. So I want to start with that point, and that is that judges are comfortable with the idea, I think, that there is some tool other than you just putting up numbers and adding up numbers. And we're used to that. Now, then the question is, well, what about the qualified information, not the quantified information, the qualified information that gets you there? So that obviously is where things get a lot trickier. I haven't had it happen yet in my courtroom, to my knowledge, that someone is relying on something that created by artificial intelligence. But when you're looking at Pratt stats, I assume we're all still looking at Pratt stats. Shannon, bless his memory, right? But we're still in that realm. I know Roger Grabowski is coming up with some revision of Pratt stats. That's the outer limit of what I know, right? But you're looking at other data outside of what you know. So I think the idea that you're going to look to something else other than your own knowledge, again, is something that judges are comfortable with. Where the discomfort comes, and this isn't just in the land of expert testimony, this is really the discomfort that I'm seeing when I talk to judges and talk to lawyers about AI, is the idea that the AI algorithm is a black box and it spits out this information, never to be questioned where that information came from. And that's where judges are uncomfortable. That's where lawyers have been uncomfortable. So I think the idea that you can use some other information in coming up with your valuation is not foreign to us. After all, that's what you're doing, whether it's adding up numbers on a calculator or on a spreadsheet, or whether it's looking at industry data, whether it's from Pratt stats or any other learned information. The problem comes from being unable to test that learned information. So I think the biggest takeaway is going to be, when you use something to come to valuation, disclose that something in the report so it can be questioned and tested. Just like, again, if you used Pratt stats or anything else, you would disclose it, and you would be potentially confronted with, well, don't you know that Mr. Pratt said on page 26 of his report that of his data XYZ, and isn't that different from what you're saying here? So I think really that's the key thing about this new world is really being able to tell the trier of fact, being able to tell the judge initially what it is that you've looked at, so that it can be tested by cross-examination.
Okay, fair. And you said you haven't had an issue with expert witnesses where this has come up yet, or?
No, and you think about it, Janae, because a year ago we were thinking, well, AI in my profession, we were thinking AI was when you place the first and ninth letters of the alphabet together consecutively. And then the shot heard around the world came out roughly this time last year with the MATA case, M-A-T-A case in the Southern District of New York, where a judge, a trial judge in the Southern District of New York, not an evaluation case, but in a commercial case, was confronted with fake cases. And it was really the first time that my profession really started looking en masse. And I guess my part of the profession, the judiciary part of the profession, started looking en masse. Oh my gosh, we might be confronted with information, not even from experts, from lawyers, that's not real. So it is relatively new. Everybody's talking about it. Every lawyer and every judge that I know is talking about it. What the solution is, we're not there yet. And I know that I'm on a couple of different task forces, one at the New York State level, and then one at the local level of the part of New York that I'm from, the downstate part outside of New York City, I guess to describe it, where we are studying this very issue for our part of the profession of, how much we as judges can rely on AI, what we as judges have to do if we rely on AI. After all, AI has been with us forever, and we judges all use Lexus, we all use Westlaw, we all listen to Spotify as we were driving into work, which came up with songs based on the songs that we're listening to. So it's very much part of our lives. The idea of generative AI and creating something that heretofore hadn't existed is something that's very, very new to us. So, our profession, my profession moves very, very slowly. The legal profession moves very, very slowly and is very slow to embrace change. The judiciary part of the legal profession, I think, has even more trepidation to embrace change, because if we embrace it, then we are endorsing it. We're not just advocating it for it as lawyers would, but we're endorsing it. So I saw the raised eyebrow, Janae, when you said, "Oh, you haven't confronted AI." No, 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 not yet, not yet, not at the expert level. And I think we're just sort of realizing it exists at the lawyer level. But I'm envisioning how lawyers are going to be using AI. And, in the kind of cases that are before me, the kind of cases that you all are working on, those cases have, of course, voluminous documents that need to be culled and then sorted and then determining what's important and what's not important. My part of the profession is realizing just how much AI can be helpful in that process. And when I say my part of the profession, I'm going to say actually the lawyer part of my profession, where lawyers are finally realizing, okay, that's right. I really don't need to put too much human power into this at all, other than entering my prompts to determine, well, what are the hot documents? Now that I see what the hot documents are, what are the relationship among the hot documents? Which of the hot documents discuss whatever the issue is here? So I would think that if you're using AI to that extent for your background, I don't think I need to know about that. I don't think I need to know about that, because that's how you come. That's how you're analyzing information. That's your internal thought process. You need to be able to explain it, of course. But the real question is using AI for your conclusions. And that's where I think that it's so important to disclose if you are going to use AI for conclusions, because again, it comes down to what is that algorithm. And once we know what that algorithm is, we obviously have the questions that come into anything involving AI. Is the data set sufficient? Is there any bias in the data set? To the extent there is bias, how is that being accounted for? And these are all questions generally with AI, but they would very much apply to AI in the valuation world also.
Have you heard, or are the task forces exploring any technology or software to detect if AI has been used in various components of either?
So here's the thing about that, right? Is how many armies do I have to police what people are giving me? So from the judge's perspective, I think it's very much, we still have to rely on the adversary system. After all, I have 2 law clerks. Federal judges have 3 at the trial level, 4 at the appellate level. That's not a big army to fight the phalanx of lawyers and accompanying experts in what they do. So many judges have said, with respect to lawyer work, if you are using generative AI, not AI, but generative AI, you are still responsible for your work. That seems to be the general ethos. Some judges are going even further and saying you must discuss that with your client and must discuss the risks. I'm not of the mindset that should be done, because again, how many armies do I have to police that, and what are the remedies going forward, and do I want to get in between a lawyer and her client on how they relate to each other? So I think most judges are going with I call it the Ronald Reagan model, trust but verify. You want to use something using AI, make sure that it stands up to the adversary system.
Mm-hmm. That's fairly interesting, because you talked about the Mata case, and there was also an article recently in one of our valuation publications, the Quick Read, and I don't know if you get that, I don't know if you read it, but Michael Pachter wrote an article about AI, and he was talking about a made-up report from IBIS World that I think it was ChatGPT that they were using, that it pulled up this report from IBIS World, and if they hadn't have gone and checked, I think they had to call and speak to people on the phone with IBIS World, it sounded like, from the article, to figure out that this report did not exist. And so yeah,
and that's so dangerous if that happens, right? I mean, that's it. Then that is your last time testifying in front of that judge, perhaps your last time testifying in that jurisdiction, and maybe your last time testifying, because you become very toxic to retaining counsel. So the real takeaway is, you're going to use AI for anything, it's still your work. It's still you signing your name and you standing up for your work. Just like the lawyers who are giving me a brief, if they cite to a case that doesn't exist, that's dangerous, not just on that case, but it's dangerous for their reputation. It may be dangerous to their ability to practice law also. The Mata case, the lawyer was sanctioned under Rule 11, which again is the, it says that the pleading was frivolous, which is bad enough because you obviously have to disclose that to your insurance carrier, malpractice carrier forever. But in the Google age, everybody knows about it. And then it hit the lawyer in their pocket also because they were fined $5,000, along with some very strong language that, although the lawyer apologized, a forced apology is no apology. I would say that probably wasn't the lawyer's best day, probably the lawyer's worst day in the profession. Maybe the day after that was worse because other clients decided not to retain them anymore. So I think that the best takeaway is I wouldn't necessarily fear the judge's wrath simply for using generative artificial intelligence. The fear is not disclosing it such that it's subject to cross-examination, but also using it improperly and not citing correctly. And just I see a comment in the text. It comes back to supervision, which is when I lecture on AI to lawyers and they say, well, Judge, how can we use this? I said, okay, it starts with you have the duty of competence, which means you have a duty to know what's going on. But second, you have the duty to supervise. So ChatGPT in my profession, I call it the nameless, faceless first-year associate. You're responsible for the work of your first-year associate who has a face and has a name. So too, you're responsible for what ChatGPT tells you.
Yeah, fabulous. Well, I am very fascinated, and I was hoping that we might, I don't know, just get some interesting, juicy, fun experiences. So I think that was the facial eyes.
I'm sorry. I don't have juicy.
Come on.
I got a lot of warnings. And I would dare say that Platt and Yates, they're much smarter than I am, but I don't think they'd have juicy and fun either. This is a to be continued conversation, and indeed, I started having this conversation at dinner at our super conference in December in Florida, and I think it's a conversation that's worth having, and it's a talk that we should continue to have every couple of ABW segments. But I think it's a conversation that I encourage all of you to have among yourselves about how you possibly could use generative artificial intelligence, recognizing that you'd have to disclose what you used. I think that's the key thing is what you used has to be able to stand up to some semblance of cross-examination.
Yeah. I think we had corresponded. I found that the Bar Association had a whole issue published on AI and various issues with AI, and it was February of 2020. So it was 4 years ago that they were already, and I think it quoted some cases and things that had happened all the way back to 2016. Mm-hmm. So maybe I'm slow, but
my profession is more thinking about how lawyers are using AI, generative AI, than we're thinking about experts, but it will ultimately filter down to experts. I see Michael Kaplan has joined us, and I still think when it comes to generative AI that the tasting the pastrami sandwich is better than any ChatGPT generated pastrami sandwich. So Michael, I know that's probably a segue into what you want to share with us, because I know we're getting to the end of our time together.
Yeah.
Judge Driscoll, you hit the nail on the head about tasting the pastrami sandwich. But when I look at AI, and by the way, in my non-accounting, valuation, forensic, professional activities, in my photojournalistic activities, and my video creation activities, AI is a wonderful thing. It lets me do things that I couldn't do before, and I spend a lot more time in the editing bay creating things that would have been a nightmare to create in the past. However, we move into the world of being an expert witness. And I always, and I regularly, when I have a trial coming up, I try to sleep at night, envisioning myself sitting on the witness stand, being cross-examined about my opinions and all the work that I did leading up to my opinions, knowing that the guy on the other side who's doing the cross-examination wants to impeach me, wants to make me look like an idiot, wants to do all kinds of things so that the trier of fact, the judge or the jurors, will not embrace my testimony as I want them to embrace it. As Judge Driscoll said, you can think of AI as your first year law clerk. Well, when we do work, when we have associates working with us, don't we review all of their work? Isn't everything reviewed, re-reviewed, ticked and tied and all of that? So that when we walk into the courtroom, we're giving testimony based upon good evidence, based upon the best evidence, based upon the appropriate analysis of the best evidence. And it was best summed up, as I see it, by the great American philosopher, Frank Rosillo. I don't know if we have a photograph of Frank, but Frank is an outstanding valuation expert. And I've had the privilege of teaching with him in various curricula that we have. And Frank summed it up perfectly. He said, you walk into the courtroom and there is something in your report or something that you are relying upon in formulating your opinion, you own it. You own it. If it is a link in the chain leading to your opinion, you own it. It's yours. You better be prepared to defend it. You better be prepared to explain why it was the right piece of evidence, why it was used properly. So let's bring this full circle. When we're dealing with AI, it's great. I mean, it's just a wonderful tool that we have. But the ticking and tying and reviewing and verification, it is the same. We have to give it the same degree of scrutiny that we would give to any work that was done by any of our staff, any of our consultants, anyone we reach out to. Because if things go wrong when you're on the witness stand, you're the one who suffers. It all comes back on you. Sitting on the witness stand is a world of first person singular. There is no we in expert witness. In preparing for your testimony, you're taking that we and turning it into an I. And part of that we that you're transforming into the I is the we, is that portion that was provided by AI. So I've said what I have to say, and it's really going to be interesting as to how the application of AI unfolds as we move forward.
I think that this is a fascinating conversation because our industry, everyone's industry, is transforming, it's changing. We've got new tools, we've got new ways to get efficiency, but none of it will substitute for good conscious thought, good intentional writing, the relating, all of that type of stuff. It's curating. It's not really allowing us to just navigate without it. So I think this is a fascinating time.
Agreed. Thanks, Mel.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you. We've got our next program. Michael, did you have other announcements or no?
This Michael?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I don't have anything else.
Michael is speechless. He's done. Way to go. All right. So as we close out this month's program, we will have another. This one was a good one. We had a lot of good conversation, and we've got another one coming up next month, March 18th, as you see on the screen. Same thing. If you want to make sure you're enrolled to get CPE, contact the headquarters at NACVA. We'll make sure we get you signed up. In the meantime, you have an incredible month, an incredible time, and thank you for being here today. We'll see you next time. Cheers.